Art and spirit, mystic color. And we're going to look at two artists, one from the Bauhaus movement and then an independent artist, a Jewish artist, both of whom used uh, color significantly in their work. Actually, our first artist here, Johannes Itten, is the creator or of the modern color wheel that we use, that artists use to mix their colors. So
Hmm.
he was the founder of that, and you can see by the looks at him, he was a mystic and very fond of mysticism and associated mystical meanings to shapes and to colors, as well as colors to shapes. So we'll take a look at that. It says Bauhaus style. The Bauhaus style, that it was that German art movement between the world wars that tended to feature what simple geometric shapes, rectangles and spheres without elaborate decorations. So it's kind of a precursor to brutalism, just very very standard shapes. And a color theorist. So this is one of his paintings. He was a follower of a man named Oz Hamish, who this quote is actually from, although Johannes did the painting here. But I was very attracted to the text on it. Greetings and health to the hearts that are illuminated by the light of love and cannot be led astray by the hopes of a heaven or the fear of a hell. Yeah, purity at its utmost there, getting rid of the motivations in spiritual life and coming to it. And also this equation, equating light and love, which I want to just bring to the front because it'll be more important later in looking at some of his works. But if you remember, Eckhart Tolle had that experience that the day following his enlightenment experience, he said that he saw, not in a metaphoric way, but actually saw in reality that light is love, and he saw it everywhere, and spent those first few months just being inundated with bliss
Hmm.
in that absolute surrounding of light everywhere, making everything grow. It's that light or that love, the foundation of the universe, Satchitananda. That Ananda being that love, that bliss, and how everything finds its source in that love. So we're going to jump into them here. He was quite a controversial character because of his mystical ideas. He encouraged his students to be integrated. He wanted their physical, their spiritual, and their mental faculties integrated into a whole. He says he encouraged his students to embrace mysticism as a part of their art practice. He
Mhm.
taught meditation and breathing exercises as well as gymnastic routines that were designed to maximize creativity. He was a follower of Mazdaznan, which I had never heard of until I ran into him. A fire cult originating in the United States that was largely derived from Zoroastrianism. He observed a strict vegetarian diet, practiced meditation as a means to develop inner understanding and intuition, which was for him the principal source of artistic inspiration and practice.
Hmm.
So, very interesting because we're going to find this also in our artist, the second artist that we're going to look at, this foundation of creativity in really the silence of the self, pulling it from the divine, God, love, that initial existence, bliss, absolute, as the foundation for art. And so his work, he became controversial a lot because of this. He began really emphasizing this spiritual movement, and the Bauhaus art school ultimately let him go because of it, because the
Hmm.
students in a cult-like way were kind of really gathering around him and were getting more interested in the mystical aspects of his teaching than in the art of the institution. And so Bauhaus exerted its identity as being an industrial, mass-produced art form. And at that point, Johannes decided to move on and to start his own school, which unfortunately was only around for 3 years because the Nazis came into power and he got classified as one of those deviant art movements that were destroyed in that process, which was quite interesting because this Mazdaznan actually had an Aryan element to it, a judgment of race, and also defined the Aryan race as being creatively superior. So it's interesting that the Nazis actually designated him a deviant art form, although he wasn't arrested or anything like that, but they closed his school. But anyway, I found that interesting that that somehow it didn't make the cut. So this is his color wheel. This is for, and he assigns meaning, mystical meaning to color and to shape, as you'll see here, which is quite interesting. We'll see that mirrored in the Jewish tradition here in a few minutes. It says for Itten, the color red represents a physical substance. It seems static and heavy. He therefore assigns the static form of the square to the color red. Yellow appears fierce and aggressive, a weightless character, and according to Itten, stands for the mind and thinking. The triangle matches this character. The color blue, on the other hand, appears round according to Itten. It evokes a feeling of relaxation and movement and stands for the spirit moving within itself, as he describes it. The circle corresponds to the color blue, as it is a symbol of constant movement. Thus, between the red square and the yellow triangle is the orange trapezium. In the transition from blue to red is an ellipse is created, representing the color violet, and between the yellow triangle and the blue circle, a spherical green triangle with the rounded colors is formed. Those are all just kind of by the wayside, but as we look at some of his art, we can use this as a key for kind of interpreting what he's trying to say or to bring across to us. This is one of his paintings from 1919, Lifting and Rest. So you can see he wasn't, looking at his artwork, he's quite diverse. He has a lot of representational work. He has some purely abstract work, and he has anything in between. It's quite interesting, but all of them full of color. He says, color is life. And for a world without a color appears to us as dead. Colors are primordial ideas. Are primordial ideas, the children of light. And so, again, we see his drawing the color going back to the absolute. That white is the unity, the one without a second, and that the step down from that, the manifestation that light brings, the manifestation of love that brings, is the color of the universe. And these are our, he says the primordial ideas, or basically just the seed from which all things are expressed. And he says, he who wants to become a master of color must see, feel, and experience each individual color in its many endless combinations with all the other colors. Colors must have a mystical capacity for spiritual expression without being tied to objects. I found that he thinks, he'll say later on, actually, we have a quote for it, where he says that this idea of freeing or liberating color from object is kind of the goal of abstract expressionism or abstract painting, this formless ideal. But you can see if we look at some of his color definitions there, we can see by the placement of some of his things. It's interesting because he goes from the center out in this painting. You see that it's a series of diamonds or triangles coming from the bottom to the top in sort of a zigzag pattern. It's subtle, but when you look closely at it, you can see it appear. And, I was kind of aligning that with the circles on them to a diagram that I saw of the chakras. And it's an interesting, I'm not sure it was in his mind, but it's an interesting alignment that it sort of works in that sense. But he's got his triangles, which, have to do with mind and thinking. And you've got an ascension along a yellow stripe or column in the middle of the painting there. And that yellow again is that aggressive or fierce learning, mind and thinking, transcendence. And blue, there's not so very much blue around. A lot of red in the middle, which he would say is kind of that foundational or heavy or something taking form in the midst of that, and just slight uses of blue around the edges, but not a whole lot of relaxation or spirit within itself in that painting. A lot of activity, a lot of multi-directions with circles centered in their spaces. Says the spiral that constitutes the backbone of a tower. Now, he's referring here in the first sentence to a sculpture that he did called Tower of Fire, and it's no longer around. It was destroyed. There is a reconstruction of it, but it's the spiral here that he says that he painted in this painting. He draws the same parallel between them. The spiral that constitutes the backbone of the tower represents the possibility of achieving ascended states and spiritual evolution, aims that were central to his theory or to his tradition, Mazdaznan. The same symbolism is also visible in the aforementioned painting De Begegnung, the encounter or the meeting, which is the one pictured here from 1916. This work, which has also been titled Meeting, centers on two intertwining spiral forms. This particular shape has more universal significance as a theosophical archetype of geometric forms in nature and a symbol of transcendence beyond the physical concrete world. And you see that in that his final two colors meeting at the center of the page are the white, which he in other places has mentioned being that purity or that mercy, peace, or calm or surrender, and the yellow, which again is that mind and thinking, bringing us to our ascendant state. And the two spirals, he's broken the hue or the lightness into the grays, that spiral of gray, and separated it from the pure color itself, kind of is saying that sort of an experience of those colors on our ascendancy is tied to those values. And it's all surrounded there. You can sort of see a human figure maybe embracing the spiral or being pulled into the spiral. You can see perhaps an upward arrow, which ends in the center of the spiral in black there. You can see the sort of the left-hand side of it as it points up, indicating that upward movement. You can see at the top the human mind or the human head up there with brown, which is foundational, and that green, which is a mixture of that yellow and blue. So it's a mixture of mind and spirit within itself. So you can see his representation of the human on their journey to ascendancy. It says colors are primordial ideas, children of the aboriginal colorless light and its counterpart, colorless darkness. Light, that first phenomena of the world, reveals to us the spirit and the living soul of the world through colors. So again, that allusion to this idea of that oneness breaking into the multiplicity that we run into in Vedanta so often as our fundamental idea, actually. And so he's got this child standing here, and you can see all of these pieces in this picture as you take it together with those colors and his shapes. It's interesting, the boy is in blue, he's dressed in blue. So, this idea of spirit within itself, the human being. The head, again, yellow hair there, which would indicate that mind and thinking. But you see an entire representation, foundational, because he says the square is foundational, right? It's the four corners, the four directions. And on that cube on the right, he's got a square that's surrounded in blue, which is that spirit within itself. But it's also the color palette of all the colors found on the child. So you see the child also being representative of the foundation, the beginning, and the flowers in the background, the blue that kind of highlight that growth and that development of the spirit within itself. He's holding that time card with a clock on it there. So within time, his growth, his red shoes, static, heavy substance. So you've got your foundational thing. Also, this cube on the right, the foundation is both red and black. The red being the foundation, but the black, interestingly enough, being that absence of the light. So it could be a beginning or an the before kind of represented. The triangle, the yellow triangle at the top, that enlightenment, that moon idea there with the yellow in it coming into its fullness, but still being quite eclipsed. In the youth of the young boy. So kind of fun. I don't know if that's him or not, but on the banner is his name. That's his whole name, Johann Matthias Itten there. There's some symbology up on that little circle on the ceiling, which I haven't quite determined. It's the Jewish Star of David, but I'm not sure that's really what it is because he's got the colors changed around in there. So it might be something different from that. I was thinking of the six-pointed color wheel might have had something to do with the red, blue, and yellow being marked out there, and then at the bottom, the combination of them all. So. Now, this is interesting because this is a quote from Itten. This play becomes joy, joy becomes work, and work becomes play. When I read that, I got this strange sensation, like I've heard that. That association I've seen before. So I went looking, and sure enough, from a quote from Vivekananda at the bottom here, serve the living God. God comes to you in the blind, in the halt, in the poor, in the weak, in the diabolical. What a glorious chance for you to worship. The moment you think you are helping, you undo the whole thing and degrade yourself. Knowing this, work. What follows, you say? You do not get that heartbreak, that awful misery. Then work is no more slavery. It becomes a play and joy itself. Work, be unattached. That is the whole secret. And, just all the words are there. Play, joy, and work equated in Itten's mind, and right there in Swamiji also. It becomes a play, a joy itself. So the nature of this doing, of this effort, and in the way that Itten talked about his motivations and process for painting and for creating, comes from the exact same motivation. Which how can that be coincidental? I mean, that's just amazing to me. He says here, the end and aim of all artists, of all artistic endeavor, is liberation of the spiritual essence of form and color, and its release from imprisonment in the world of objects. It is from this aspiration that non-objective art has arisen. So he's got for his endeavor, in his abstract work, his non-formed work, non-objective work, that the end is liberation, freedom from form, freedom from limit, freedom from size, freedom from relativity, a return maybe to that whiteness. And in this picture of this woman, the shrouded woman here, you see lots of the white as purity and resolution, the yellow, with mind, wisdom, thinking, shining in on her at many different points, the white cat, and the things around her having red as their static, grounded, heavy foundations, but her really seating upon it. Now her right side has a little bit of the red kind of being mirrored in it, but on the other side, not so much. So I don't know, a woman sitting there in contemplation with her cat, and it's both objective and non-objective. It's it's got forms to it, but the forms are almost predominantly square and triangle in there, with a hint of objects, of course, but they're trapped within a strong geometric, um, I guess what, rhythm around them, kind of holding them still.
The dimension of her skirt is quite beautiful.
It is.
The skirt of her pant leg.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's really quite stunning.
it's nice. It's and the color forms down there are quite relaxing, that yellow and
Hmm.
blue mixing coming into that green.
Hmm.
Uh, it
And the white
is.
cat.
Yeah. Just sitting there, very contented. She's very relaxed also. Looks like she's sitting at a
Hmm.
piano with her arm on the keys, maybe.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And she's not unhappy. She's got a slight happiest smile there coming. Somehow it looks more like a
Hmm.
smile than a smirk,
Hmm.
but very contented, educated, got the globe going on in the background.
Hmm.
And blue, the relax color of relaxation, he says, spirit within itself is very strong. I mean, it's predominant in the painting. And the keyboard, interestingly enough, is iterations of the three basic colors:
Right, right.
blue, red, yellow, blue, red, yellow, blue, red, yellow. So, the foundation of music, you can create all of the colors from those sounds. All right, we'll jump into
Hmm.
our man Sandy Sokolov, a Jewish painter. I don't have a whole lot of his work here because they're very repetitive. He's really working on a singular idea. But he says painting is a spiritual act, and you need not have a religious affiliation or even a belief in God to pursue it. So it's very clear where he's coming forward in it, and it's also he's also one of the first artists that I encountered a couple of years ago when I started this series, and that was kind of one of my fundamental ideas in putting these works together, is this idea that you know art creation is a spiritual act, and it is free from any religious affiliation or even a belief in God. That this creation itself contains all of it. The creation envelops all of the different traditions and atheism in its own tradition. So I liked his beginning point there for sure.
Hmm.
He says, contemplating Sandy Sokolov's large scale, vibrantly hued paintings brings back the childhood thoughts and feelings I had when peering into the opposing mirrors of a double medicine cabinet, a
Hmm.
sense of awe and wonder at the enormity of a universe with no edges or boundaries. The central animating concepts behind these sensations, infinity and its twin, eternity, slide between the physical and the metaphysical. So, and these are three of his big artworks here. He's always got those circles. And, I'm seeing kind of at least in Eastern traditions, that circle again being a symbol of that enlightenment, or in the words of Vivekananda, the circle being the only way that eternity or infinity can be expressed in the finite. How Vivekananda makes that point in his writings, that's how God expresses in the infinite in the finite. So I think that's where he's working with here. Now we're going to look at here in a moment, he's got his own color theory, and it comes out of what is called the Kabbalic tree of life, Jewish
Hmm.
mysticism. You can see here, he says, I am a naturalist painter trained in Renaissance figure painting and weaned on post Impressionism. Form and light are discovered by looking within. Paintings which convincingly allude to three-dimensional space and a fully balanced schema of color and light, this is my naturalism. I still work from nature, albeit an interior supernature. In the privacy of the studio, soul-searching and laborious process bring resolution. A work is finished when I recognize it, and I can say aloud, I know this painting. I've seen it before.
Hmm.
A
Hmm.
very interesting idea.
Very interesting.
there's a video that I saw online about an autistic young boy who is one of those, they call them idiot savants, for lack of a nicer
Mm-hmm.
term.
Mm-hmm.
And he can sit and write out in real time an entire symphony with all of the instrumental parts on it. That's one of his gifts. The other gift is that he can listen to any music, symphonic music, orchestral music, whatever. He can listen to it once and sit down at a keyboard and play every note of what he has just listened to. And so in this documentary about him, the documentarian asks him as he's writing a symphony, because he's demonstrating a symphony that they play at the end of the documentary. But he's writing this whole symphony. He's writing it as fast as he can write the notes, and it's like 10 or 12 parts, and he's just writing as fast as he can. And when he pauses at one point, the interviewer asks him, he says, what are you experiencing right now? How, when you're doing this, how is it being done? And the young boy said something very interesting. He says, I go deep inside and I just write down what I hear. So this symphony already exists within him. He's just going in there, hearing it, and writing it down. And I was thinking of that when this man talks about his painting. When I look at it and I know that I've seen this painting before and can recognize it, then I know it's finished. And that points to such a fascinating ideal behind mysticism. You know, that we are the instruments of that creation, but everything that we do has already been done. You know, everything that we say has already been said. It's all in the mind of God. And it's quite fascinating because the other night I was laying in bed and I was just thinking, you know, and that process of thinking in my mind, I talk to myself and kind of spin these ideas in my head. And I was kind of going through that process, and I just suddenly kind of third partied it, you know, stepped out of myself and looked at the process. And I thought, what is going on here? I'm talking to myself about ideas that I'm presenting to myself. I said, who is it who's presenting the ideas? And who is it that they're being presented to? Are they not both me? So what is the point? If I know the ideas and can say them, what is the point of repeating them to myself? And I came to that understanding of this notion that Eckhart Tolle talks about, of that's the silence within being pregnant with all knowledge, an immense source of knowledge that's greater than anything that could fit in the mind. And I thought, what a fascinating thing that my sitting here and actually thinking about this stuff is utterly unnecessary. And so I did, at that point, I did that experiment. I just kind of silenced the mind, silenced myself to see if I could get an intuitive perception of the ideas I was just talking to myself about. And it was a fascinating exercise. And I link that very closely with both the musician and this man's idea of you know, manifesting something that already exists, manifesting something that comes from the silence or from this space within through the creative process, which is really not a creative aspect, but much more an integrated aspect, where we are integrating with the infinity of the divine and bringing particulars of that infinity into the finite, you know, going and literally going inside into the grab bag of the moment, this eternal moment, grabbing something, and whatever it is, you know, from inside this space, we pull out a building, we pull out a symphony, we pull out a painting, we pull out a sculpture, but it's all coming from the moment. And it's all coming from that infinite silence that we access when the particular of ourself, the ego, silences, diminishes, or surrenders. You know, and so I see this creative act that these artists are describing. Many of them, in the same way, are talking about this. And to just watch this magic, really, literally magic of being able to, from this moment, pull out everything that we've ever created, pull out everything that we've ever put together. and art being a way of touching that, of reaching that, and using our tools. I think we would do the reverse. Itten wanted to use tools to access that creativity, but we as spiritual seekers can look at the process of that creativity and understand the implications spiritually for how we're put together, how the world comes about, how we come about. He
Mm.
says, although I am not an observant Jew, I have been strongly influenced by my cultural heritage. As a child, I loved to draw, and early on, my grandfather told me a Jew may never create an image of God. Still, the Kabbalah describes Sephirot as the manifestations of God that allow him to appear in both the metaphysical and the physical universes. Now, uh, where is that? Sephiot that he describes, uh, that's the tree of life, that it belongs to the Kabbalah, to Jewish mysticism. We're going to look at that here in a minute. And that's a step down of how creation happens from the top, which is the God, the never ending light, to the bottom, which is manifestation. So, talks about it here.
Mm.
So, this is the Sephirot. This is the tree of life. Now, interestingly enough, if you take out the top crown there, which is actually the never-ending light, which would actually be God, in a sense. Of course, the Jews would never have a representation of God like that, but the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, from which Adam and Eve ate, is represented in the 10 circles below that. And so this is, you can follow any of these paths, and they show you how any of these nodes are created and where they lead. So it's kind of a map of spiritual development, starting from gross manifestation, gross materialism at the bottom. From gross materialism, you go to the foundation, which is the creation, the physical world that we live in. And from there, you can either go the path of surrender or the path of victory, that strength overcoming or surrendering to that divine. And from those places, you can see how you can map them out, how whatever path you're going to take in order to reach the divine, to get to the top. Each of these nodes plays a part in that, and each one of them has a color associated with it. So red is energy, heat, or restriction. Blue, cool, kindness, calming. Yellow, balance, joy, harmony. Black absorbs everything, selfishness. It can be considered good when it's absorbing knowledge.
Mm.
So it's an interesting if there. And then orange is strength and connection. Purple, spirituality, transcendence, mercy. Green, the start of creation, building, beginnings, renewal. White, mercy is mercy, peace, calm, pure, and surrender. So these are just the tools that we get from the tree of life in order to look at our artist's work. This is one of his paintings. So you can take that color chart there and you can see kind of where he's going with this. So you have the yellow outside of the circle, the big giant yellow. So that's your balance, joy, and harmony. So the circle exists within that. You've got your red coming next, which is your energy, heat, restriction, holding the line, holding the shape of the circle. And then this blue, probably blue in there, that calmness as it enters in. And that inner different hues of that blue, different hues of that calmness, the brightest toward the middle. And that it's sort of an oasis being drawn out and separated from the heavy reds and yellows around the edge of the painting, which only resolve into a blue at the bottom. In there. This one here, he adds a few other pieces to it. He has two more opposing triangles kind of pushing in on that space, but not really pushing in on it. But it's that balance being displayed. You've got an equal pull from both sides. and both sides are this orange and yellow, this strength and connection, this wanting to come together, this moving to come together, and then it happens within that absorbing space in the middle there, where that's filled with calmness and balance and harmony. So he plays with this tree of life and tries to build up on each of the different nodes, or to give a different sense of meaning based on that Kabbalic idea. Does that one do anything for you? It's kind of an odd.
Yeah, it's really quite beautiful.
Hmm.
The two orange and yellow bring my eyes to the center, which is the
Hmm.
beautiful purple, and then the dark blue, and then almost into infinity. It draws you right into this, to the center, at least for me.
Yeah,
It's very
that's
interesting.
right. So more than I saw opposition, which I don't
Yeah,
wasn't really fitting, but you're seeing direction toward, kind of a
yes,
movement toward the center. I think that's probably
yes.
a better interpretation, because there's not much sign of opposition.
Yeah,
I
it's very
found,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah. So that's the
Is he
colors.
Israeli or does he live in the States? Do you know where he lives?
He lives in the States.
Hmm. Okay.
He's a non-practicing Jew, so he's
Yeah.
not, but
Okay.
he does for being a non-practicing Jew, he's still referencing all of these Kabbalic ideals and presenting
Hmm.
them. So it's kind of an interesting thing that
Hmm.
he sees himself as non-practicing.
Hmm.
All right. That's actually all of the art that I had put in there for today.
Hmm.
So we're
Just
finishing at
fascinating.
quarter till. This idea of the meanings of colors, the meanings of shapes. I mean, that in almost all the mystic traditions, as they develop as mystical traditions, they tend to pull on those things, which is kind of an interesting idea. When I was there was a period where I went through kind of earth religion phase, where I looked into Wiccan and I looked into Druidism and
Oh,
some of the earth religions off of the Isles, and
uh-huh.
part of that I learned to read runes and
What are they? What are runes?
runes
Oh,
runes
ruins.
Runes, Runes. They are the letters of the Druids, the letter forms
Oh,
of the Druids.
oh, okay.
And I had to learn them. And in order to read runes, you have to cast them, like you cast, like the same, very similar to the tarot cards, and actually works on the same idea as the tarot cards. And actually, most of these fortune telling systems are based on the same idea, and that is that there's nothing arbitrary in the universe, that nothing is independent in the universe, which is straight out of Vivekananda, straight out of Vedanta, that this atom is in this location at this moment because every other atom in the universe is in their position at that particular moment, and it can be
Hmm.
no other way. And so
Hmm.
they take that notion of when you turn the tarot cards over, or when you cast your runes, they fall in that layout because of everything else. And so that because of the person who's an adept can look at that and infer the future or the past or whatever,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
it can all be directed from that position of things. So anyway, I had to create some runes, and so I had to find an oak tree that had been struck by lightning, and I had to take a branch and cut it into coins, and on each coin I drew one of the letters, one of the runes. And I was very interested to find out that the
Hmm.
source of these runes are from the shapes of nature.
Hmm.
And so they looked at the way that tree branches break out of a tree. They look at the shape of when you pull a leaf off the tree, what the shape is that's left behind from where that leaf was. And those are the things that became the letters, or became the runes that they did their writing with. So
Fascinating.
it is fascinating. It's very interesting, these mystical thinkers. But it's usually mystical systems that were created within their mysticism. You know what I mean? These
Hmm.
weren't things that they saw before they were mystics that led them to mysticism. It's like they defined themselves as mystics, and then went in and defined colors and shapes and letters and
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
whatnot. So these fascinating systems, which I'd like to get into sometime, but I don't. I think it's several lifetimes of studying, even just the
It's
Kabbalah.
fascinating. Yeah. Yeah. And that earlier fellow, that's that. I love the way he was doing the physical and the mental in order to promote creativity. It's a shame he lived during a time. Yeah. All of this. Is this